There is no doubt that Microsoft has left their mark everywhere, influencing our daily lives. Microsoft has an opportunity to be part of influencing and encouraging and embracing technology. Would you please welcome Greg Beyonce, Senior Program Officer with Microsoft Philanthropies, to the stage.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here joining you today. Microsoft, generally speaking, very, very happy to be joining you today. This is our first year sponsoring Business Days, and particularly excited to address computer science in the state of Montana, and specifically computer science education. Both why are we having this conversation about computer science education becoming foundational for all students? What does that mean specifically for Montana, from business to school, right down to the student level? And then how is Microsoft engaged in this work, and how can we continue to partner with you to continue to drive shared objectives around computer science education? So I'd like to kind of start with the why we do this work. We know that the technology is present everywhere and growing in its influence in our businesses worldwide, globally, and here in Montana as well. And we also know that presence of technology and the continued integration of technology into the work that Americans do every single day has the potential to be disruptive. And when we think about the rate of change for technology and how that impacts the work that folks do, I'm really taken by the stat that I'm sharing with you right here that says 65% of children that are entering primary school today will be really doing jobs that don't exist right now. And that's how much things are changing. So what we need to do is think about, how do we respond as a community, from business to schools to policy? What's the right response for us to prepare students and our future workforce to grow and meet that need? So I'm going to go to thinking about our challenge as Microsoft Philanthropies is broad, but specifically within digital skills, the team that I sit on. I want to break down quickly for you when we're talking about computer science. Digital skills certainly is a little bit broader than that, and it includes digital literacy and really how we go about kind of working with computers, how we use a computer. These things are not new to schools. What we're really focusing on now is that shift from, yes, it's important to know how to use the computer, but also how do we create with computers, right? How do we really manage change with computers? And so in terms of the fundamentals and why we think computer science is so foundational, part of that is that we know it's completely cross-cutting, and that knowledge of computer science is kind of a base set of knowledge that students will need regardless of the career that they enter into. Also, computer science, when taught properly, really addresses fundamental kind of computational thinking and critical thinking mindset. So it's a really cross-cutting and not subject-specific endeavor when you get into the deep thinking that computer science necessitates. And then finally, when we think about us as citizens of this world, not just preparing to meet the needs of a job, but really to conduct ourselves in this world and really to have an understanding of the decisions that we need to make on a daily basis and how computers relate to that work. And then finally, we know that students actually enjoy computer science. So not only are these all these compelling reasons why students might want to think about taking computer science and how we can help prepare schools to offer students computer science, at the end of the day, students show up at school in many cases because of things that they really enjoy and connect to. And it turns out computer science is one of those things. It comes in just after the arts in terms of the most liked and appreciated subject by students. I also want to show you this opportunity slide. When we think about how the workforce is changing and how the jobs of tomorrow are changing, or even now, and we look at data from 2002 and then fast forward about 15 years or so, we can see a change in two significant ways. When we look at the bar graph here from the left to the right, we can see that there's been a shift both in terms of the number of those jobs, shifting from jobs that were once somewhat rare, being highly digital or even moderately digital, to now being predominantly the case of being at least moderately digital or highly digital. And similarly and importantly, when we think about the opportunity for students, when we look at the average pay or salary for those jobs. There are enormous differences when we go from kind of the non-digital jobs into the moderately digital and highly digital. But the key here really is that most jobs, if not all jobs, are shifting from what was once non-digital to now at least moderately digital. And so how do we prepare our students to take advantage of that? I also want to show that at a national level, right, there's tremendous demand, and we know this is also true in Montana, but starting kind of at that national piece before we drill down to the Montana-specific data, right, 500,000 plus openings that relate to computer science. So there's tremendous need there, and then there's also tremendous opportunity in terms of the lifetime earnings for students who pursue those opportunities. Just one more way to look at this. If we look at kind of the market cap of organizations and we look at the largest publicly traded organizations, you can really see that shift just over 10 years' time to where the 5 companies with the largest market cap are tech companies. And I share that to show this is a powerful shift that's happening, but also to remind us that it's not just those 5 companies, but it's really affecting every field. So I always worry about a little over-reliance or over-focus on, hey, computer science education is about preparing the next Amazon or Microsoft or Google or really tech-specific worker. That's not really what we're talking about, right? 67% of jobs are actually outside of the computing industry. So that's where the real opportunity is and the real need for students. So I want to pause here and just have people check in at their table and just kind of level set a little bit. I realize that at this point we probably know the name, the role, and the affiliation, but I would like folks at the tables to think about and check in with each other about how are we seeing technology changing our industries that we're working in. And I want to have a little share out of that afterwards. But I'd also like to give you a minute to think about what questions might you have for the session and our time together today. So if we could turn and check in with neighbors, again, on these 2 items right here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and come back together as a group. Appreciate that you were able to check in with peers and hopefully talk a little bit about how you see computer science impacting your industry and technology, what that change has looked like. Dan's going to go ahead and start us out with an example.
It's really interesting in the chamber industry where a lot of it used to be kind of person-to-person networking. And what we're really seeing is a shift to both in-person networking and online networking within the business community. We're also seeing a lot more data-driven solutions within chambers, really looking at kind of not only advanced metrics, these used to be really kind of the sole bailiwick of like economists and so on and so forth. And just a real key thing with the chamber is not only taking that information, but leveraging it to kind of serve the greater business community in our mission. So that's how our industry has really changed in especially the last 10 years.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Could I get some other folks from the audience to give some examples of how they see this in their work?
Joan Cronabush, Town Pump Hotel Group and Town Pump Corporation. We were discussing the no longer face-to-face reservations. People are booking in our parking lots on their phone or laptop computers. And then also from the convenience store, it's everything from the point of sale systems to even how your cherry cola is mixed. So.
Yeah, it's amazing what's automated.
Hi, I'm Chris Carlson from A Plus Healthcare in Kalispell. We're a statewide in-home care provider. And our industry is faced with the federal regulation of EVV, electronic visit verification, a timekeeping system, and recording of tasks that are performed with individuals in their homes. And so we're, with a big workforce, looking at training and bringing a non-digital workforce into some type of a digital world and using apps and documenting time and attendance. So it's a challenge, and I'm curious about how other people are training that non-digital workforce.
Yeah, that's a great one, and we'll put that out to the audience as well as we pass it around.
So I run a civil engineering company, and 10 years ago, we would send a 3-person crew out to survey a road, and it would take maybe a couple weeks. You'd see the crew out there doing all the mapping. Today, We put that instrument in the back of a truck and we drive up and down the road at 30 miles an hour and we get a point cloud of terabytes of data with an XYZ coordinate on everything that you can see, and then we process that and vectorize it and do it all in the office now. And so we can survey literally miles of roadway in just hours.
Hi, I'm Penny Zachariason, and we own a private medical practice in Bozeman, Montana. And how the digital age has affected us is tremendous. 20 years ago, there was no physician that had any computer access. Basically, they did everything by paper. All their notes, all their charts, all patient registration, medical insurance billing, medical insurance coding, everything was done paper and ledger. Nowadays, we are strongly encouraged to do everything electronically and in the cloud. So that has affected all of our service providers as far as from patient registration, holding medical records, everything is done digitally. You rarely see a doctor walk in with a paper medical record into a patient exam room. They carry iPads, they carry their laptops, they carry their phones. Everything is done and recorded and sent up to the cloud, and that includes all the billing, medical insurance billing and coding. Things have to be done electronically, and that's pretty much mandated by the government these days.
Thanks. Thank you. My name is Dan Carter. I work at ExxonMobil refinery over in Billings, and we were at the top of that CAP list there a number of years ago. And but we're a technology company. We have 300 people that work in Billings, but the global corporation is about 75,000. And first of all, thank you to Microsoft for elevating the conversation. I wish the legislative leaders that are here this morning could hear this, because it points to one thing, is that's getting our students in middle school, elementary, middle school, as prepared as possible for what needs to take place before they get to all of you, right? And so that's what our company has been doing. What's been changing is that people are adjusting the technology that run our systems and our processes and all that sort of stuff. But we also need to get people ready to go before they get there to get in school. And I think this is important. So thank you.
Anyone else? Oh. Not as fast as it used to be.
So my husband and I own a hardware store, so we're a small brick and mortar, but we've also gone on to selling nationally through the internet and Amazon and eBay and all the different sales vehicles that exist that didn't exist 10 years ago. So we've done that. But the other question I had with the schools is I have a senior in high school. He's interested in computers. He's actually having to go to take early college over at Gallatin because there is nothing in our high school. There's like learning Excel and there's learning apps, but there's no hardware, software, operating system, any kind of that. So I was wondering if there's any kind of concerted effort of how to educate the schools on what kind of classes they should be offering to prepare the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. We got one last one. I think you planned this for me to go back and forth. So.
I really did, Dan. Thanks. Just to piggyback off of that, I'm Karen Baumgart. I get to do workforce development for Yellowstone County. Love the idea of having more computer development and software, coding, computing in our classrooms. Curious about funding, because one of our biggest barriers with getting these programs is we have to ask an expert to leave the industry and take a massive pay cut to then teach in our school system. So curious about how you jump through that barrier.
All right.
Great, thank you. It's so good to hear the perspectives of how this is impacting Montana businesses, but also definitely taking note of the two questions, and I will address both. I think your question, if I could summarize it correctly here, is that like how are we really giving guidance to school systems so that they can build a K-12, a set of courses that prepare students so that they don't necessarily need to go off campus or pursue something outside of that core instruction. How do we really build that in and work with schools and with our nonprofit partners to help that be accomplished? So I'll certainly address that one. And I think the question back here also related as to how do we tackle some of the funding issues that are certainly relevant, and how do we, when we think about staffing of computer science courses in the school, I think implicit in your question was that some of the folks that might be right now prepared to teach those courses are in currently higher paying positions. And so how do we facilitate that switch? Or really, what are some of the other mechanisms to get existing teachers prepared to do that work as well? So I'll be addressing both of those. And let's keep the questions coming too. We'll have a couple more breaks, and then we'll also do a Q&A at the end. So just kind of like some quick Montana data, and then we'll get into some of the specifics that relate to those questions. But I want to point out that there's over 500 Montana-specific open computing positions, and that average salary, again, it does exceed the state average. So the opportunity that I shared before at the national level certainly is also very real here in Montana. I don't think we'd be surprised by that. And then also when we look at our LinkedIn data as to with job postings and demand, what are the skills that right now are in demand? There are certainly many classic skills still on that list that will remain on that list, right? Communication skills are critical. Organization is critical. But we're increasingly seeing more things that relate to computational thinking and computer science surface on those lists. So it's just kind of one more independent confirmation of this idea that there is this shift underway. How do we get students ready to take advantage of that, right? And I just also want to point out that, like, as we get students ready to take advantage of this, we're really trying to think from a lens of equity, so that when we think about computer science opportunity now, there hasn't always been equivalent opportunity for folks who might live in rural communities, people of color, females, and other groups that really historically haven't been able to participate to the same extent in computer science. And so how do we address that, right? And this data right here, though, it may be hard for you guys to read the heading, but the summary here is that when you look at schools that really have a higher free and reduced lunch threshold, so they might be what we call Title I schools, or schools that are qualifying for federal aid, and therefore kind of have more of a low socioeconomic status in terms of the student representation. Unfortunately, currently, those schools have less opportunities for computer science, right? And that can break down in a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, what we want to do is try to provide computer science for all students. And in order to do that, we really need to think big and really bake this in K-12. So it's not just about computer science offering just one in a high school and we're done, right? It's how do we prepare, to the comments in the back, thinking about children in the early stages before they make up their minds about, here's what I'm going to be. We know from research that when it comes to STEM professions, students tend to make up their mind by around middle school. So we want to have that early exposure, and then we want to provide that regular interaction and opportunity for them to have quality learning experiences. Unfortunately, most of the schools right now don't teach computer science, so really 40% at the national level, even though 90% of students and parents really want that experience. But 40% at the national level, and then 40% also in Montana. That's the same stat. Right here I pulled a stat from your great work here. I noticed that Montana, and I didn't know this coming in, leads the nation when it comes to high school graduation and individuals who hold at least a high school graduation. And I think that's something to be incredibly proud of, and also an opportunity to build upon. So when I heard the comment earlier about how can we have students not need to go off campus to get computer science experiences, but rather build that in, So since so many students are graduating, again, tremendous opportunity. The schools are doing well. They're retaining kids through the period of their graduation. So how can we introduce more computer science there? Currently, only 40 students took the AP Computer Science exam in high school in Montana last year, right? So how can that number really grow? And at the state level, the colleges and universities graduated 75 total folks with degrees in computer science or engineering. So just opportunities for growth. Now, turning to how does Microsoft then in turn carry out this work and partner with schools, nonprofits, and others to try to drive some of this change and do what we call normalizing computer science? There's really three categories of that. On one hand, we want to help build the capacity of schools. You've heard me kind of talking about, and you've heard other folks in the room say, we need to build that capacity. We're also still in the phase where we need to generate demand. We need to tell the story of why computer science is so important, really starting with the why, having conversations with others in our community to say, this is why schools need to shift. If you think about it, this is really the first time that we've rolled out a new subject since I don't know when, right? Math has been in our schools since before any of us were here, right? Same thing with science, right? Language arts, it's the same. We're trying to introduce another subject that's going to be fundamental for all students, right? And so this is a new endeavor, and we need widespread kind of support for it, and we need a coalition to get that work done. And again, that's why we're so happy to partner not only here in Montana with your great work and the work led by the governor, but really at a national and even global stage on this work. And so the final piece there is the policy work that I'll refer to as well. So what I'd like to do is kind of break this down by, I'm going to feature some partnerships that I think are relevant, then I'll talk about some programs that are relevant to this work, and then finally we'll talk about the policy piece. So in terms of partnerships, you can see from the graphic here, we have kind of varied partnerships, which include both in-school and out-of-school nonprofits that serve both of those spaces. A couple that I want to feature for you here, one being Code.org. So this relates to the question in the back and really over here as well around, how do we get the teacher training accomplished? I know Devin Holmes, who I think might be in the room with the America campaign, had contributed a lot to this work in helping bring Code.org learning experiences for teachers and students to the state. And so when we think about Microsoft's and how we fund this work, one of the really significant ways is by being the largest funder of Code.org. And Code.org has really served over 30 million students. I have some Montana-specific data here, but almost 1,500 Montana students have been served teachers have been prepared. So almost 1,500 teachers have been prepared to teach this in their classroom. And you can see that there's over 50,000 student accounts on Code.org. And what's really important also is that as Code.org does this work, they lead with that message of equity and that this is for all students. And so it's nice to see that 45% of the students taking this are actually female as well. You might also know Code.org for that demand generation side of the work that they do. They lead the, of course, Hour of Code event during Computer Science Education Week. That's a really important demand generation event to raise awareness for the importance of computer science education. But ultimately, the results speak for themselves with Code.org. They've done great work to help really drive capacity building and get teachers prepared to do this work and then carry it out in the classroom. Just feature a couple more partners for you guys, and then we'll move to the programs. Another partner of ours is the Computer Science Teachers Association, or CSTA. Just like other subjects in schools, such as math or language arts, having an association is a place for teachers who are studying this and teaching these things to students to come together and build community and learn from one another in their practice and grow. So we support CSTA for that purpose, to really give fledgling computer science teachers, because so many of them are fledgling because they weren't teaching computer science previously. They might have been teaching math, they might have been teaching language arts, maybe they came from industry, but we want to provide them with community and a network to do this. So that's what CSTA does, number one. And the other thing CSTA does is they publish the standards of, what should our students learn at K-12, right? I mentioned earlier we want to kind of build a pipeline with learning experiences K through 12. So what does a kindergartner need to know? What does a fifth grader need to know? Or a high school graduating need to know to just have the foundations for computer science, right? And so CSTA really develops that guiding document. And I know right now Montana is in the process of adopting their own standards for computer science education, and they're leaning heavily on the CSTA standards to help them, formulate their own specific iteration of that. And then finally, I want to feature a newer partnership that we have, which is with FFA, or Future Farmers of America. We think this is really important because, again, when we think about computer science for all, we need to make sure that we're reaching all of our students, including students who might be in rural areas or students who maybe haven't seen computer science as being core to their interests. Well, in meeting with the leadership of FFA, they're completely on board with the importance of precision agriculture and how technology is really revamping the work that they want to do with students, teachers, and schools. And so we've recently launched a partnership with them this last summer to help make that happen. So I look forward to sharing more of that work as it develops. This is a new partnership as of a couple months ago, but it really demonstrates our commitment to serving rural areas, and when we say computer science for all, we mean for all. Now I'd like to just share a couple of the programs that we have that are that we developed to help address these issues around capacity building for computer science. Again, I'm going to reference the question in the pack that came about how do we, engage industry, or what does it look like for someone who's maybe been an IT professional, or maybe has worked somewhat in computer science, even in a non-tech industry, but they want to come back and connect to schools and share what they know and get the next generation excited to do this work. Right? And so what we have is a program called TEALS. It stands for Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools, but it's fundamentally an industry and school partnership. And what we do is we really do a matchmaking process, because schools are currently, even with the ongoing efforts, there are still gaps, right? There are gaps in terms of schools not having staff on board to teach computer science, or maybe this person's committed to teach computer science. They've just done a great training with code.org, but they could really use a buddy who might know a little bit more about computer science and could bring some real world examples to the school with students. So that's what TEALS is all about. You take a school that wants to apply and bring a person in to kind of co-teach with a teacher. So it's that industry professional co-teaching with a newly trained computer science teacher. And this is one of our rural TEALS examples from Quincy, Washington, which is kind of eastern Washington area. And I love this quote because this is the teacher right here, and this teacher's been paired with a TEALS professional. So again, that's someone from industry who came in and taught alongside him, and he compared the experience to having a Major League Baseball player for a coach, which I think that was nice and kind and flattering, but I think it also speaks to that it does matter to teachers, and they really do appreciate that support. So what I'd like to do here is kind of give you guys a little glimpse of how TEALS works by sharing a video.
When I was a kid, Alta Vista was booming. The biggest dyeing and finishing plant for textiles in the world was here. And then Lane Company shut down, and then Burlington Industries. It's just weird. I mean, my first job, public job, not farming, was here. And my mom probably worked 40 years here.
You lost about 7,500 jobs in 2005 to 2007.
It's going to take a spark for it to come back up.
We were looking at what we need for our businesses to succeed, what kind of trainings we're lacking in, and a light bulb just went off with Carol. And he was like, we need computer science. We don't have anything like that in the high school.
I wanted them to have an opportunity to, say, okay, Microsoft believes in you. I believe in you, the leadership of the town believes in you, and they're willing to invest to bring you these opportunities so that, there is hope.
So he did some digging, and he came back and he said there is this incredible program called TEALS. Everyone was all in.
TEALS is Microsoft investing in programs to bring computer science to kids that don't have an opportunity to get it another way. There's a series of volunteers, IT professionals, that want to invest their time in helping students learn computer science.
Methods use parentheses, right?
And the whole program is about training the teacher so that the teacher can pay it forward.
When you see that light bulb go off on a kid when they finally grasp a concept, that's what makes it worth it.
I think it kind of helps me determine what I want to do in the future.
And these students, they understand that they're not going to work in the same place that their grandfather and their mother and their father, how they worked.
The next step for them will hopefully be a college or technical school or something where they put those skills to use.
They can go away to school and they can become anything that they want to become. And I want them to bring that same hope back to Alta Vista that Carol did.
If I had the opportunity to do what I want here, then I don't think I would leave.
It's all about people helping people and inspiring each other and giving each other opportunities. If I can help, and TEALS can help spark something for somebody else, I think that's wonderful.
That hopefully gave you a little taste of what TEALS is really all about. And again, I want to stress that there doesn't have to be a computer science professional living in that community. We do have remote and rural options where we can connect someone virtually. In many cases, we can ultimately, with the growing prevalence of computer science in every industry, we can tend to find someone locally. But even where we can't, we can do a rural a connection via virtual Skyping or just bringing folks into the classroom. And they do make a field trip to the school as well. All right. And I mentioned earlier that demand generation is really important. I think part of the work that we all have to do is not just tell the story about why computer science is so important, but we also have to dispel some myths along the way around who is computer science for, and really help all students see the opportunity is there for them and help them envision themselves as doing that and connecting that to the other interests that they have, right? It's not someone sitting behind a desk necessarily, right, on a computer. It's someone who might be in the field, any of the number of examples that were shared earlier today where it's really integrated with something that a student might have a core interest in. All right, and just one more program I'll feature is DigiGirls. Again, a focus on how can we excite and engage young women in this work just as well as the boys that we're bringing into this. So keeping that opportunity in mind. Okay, and now what I would like to do is kind of shift to the policy work that we're doing. The policy work is that kind of like third critical piece. I talked earlier about, we build capacity in schools and we can have programs to do that, right? And we form partnerships with nonprofits to do that work. But at the end of the day, legislation is important and policy measures can make a tremendous difference in moving the needle to get schools ready to deliver on computer science. So I'd like to share some of that work with you. Okay. In engaging in this work, we do this in partnership with many folks, of course, folks like yourself, but as a guidepost, we kind of run by the 9 core kind of policy recommendations that have been recommended by code.org and others. And these are being implemented state by state. So what I'd like to do is kind of take you through what are some of these 9 core policy recommendations that will help us normalize computer science and provide opportunities for schools and students, and what do they look like kind of as they unfold state by state, and which are particularly relevant for Montana right now. Before I dig into the specific policy recommendations, I'd like to just illustrate that we know that it matters, right? We care about these policies because we've seen already that they make a difference. So where we look, this graph shows the states that have implemented the most policies, right, have the most opportunities and the most students engaged in learning computer science. There is, of course, that direct causal relationship between the two. So enacting these policies matters. And we've seen tremendous momentum in the policy implementation. So if you look at the map on the left of the US, that's 2013. The map on the right is 2018. And what that shows is the number of states that have implemented at least one of the 9 policies, okay? So that's tremendous growth in terms of the states taking up the policies. This graph just shows things a little bit differently. It's kind of like a heat map. So the darker the color, that just means the more policies that they've implemented. And again, I'm going to reference back to that graph at the beginning that showed that matters, right? These are also the states where we have more opportunities for students to take part in computer science education. All right, so starting out with some of the wins here in Montana, some of the things that we know are already accomplished, right? We have a policy that will help teachers get certified, right? Some states don't actually have that. You can see from the map that that's not necessarily a given, but a state has to really have a method for a teacher to begin to be able to be certified to teach the subject. It's just a foundational piece that has to be in place, and Montana has that piece in place, which is great. So check that one of the 9 off, right? Another one that Montana has in place that I think is a really key, critical piece that not every state has is how do we kind of build this into our pre-service teacher prep? So yeah, we have all these teachers already out in the field. We'll call them in-service teachers, right? They have needs, right? We need to prepare them, that's true. But if we're really thinking down the line, we need to bake this into the schools of education so that someone doesn't have to kind of get it after the fact. So Montana's taken steps to really prepare the colleges and universities to then in turn prepare these future teachers to learn computer science. And that's a really big and important piece. Another one that I mentioned earlier is under development is the standards, right? It's great to have certifications and to have schools of education at colleges and universities preparing teachers, but they need to know what to teach, right? We need to be able to say, here are the appropriate things to teach. And so that's why it's so great to see that even now the CSTA standards are being used here in Montana. I'm actually working with, to some extent, the Montana team to develop a Montana-specific set of K-12 computer science standards, and that's really exciting. I'm just going to take you through a few more here. One that I think is relatively low-hanging fruit is having computer science count for a core graduation requirement, right? How do we really prepare students to be able to take advantage of these opportunities, right? There are many things that students might want to pursue when they're in school, but how do we open up some opportunity for them? One way to do it is by having computer science count for either a science or a math credit upon graduation. So many states, you can see from the map there, have enacted that, and this is one that Montana has not yet enacted, but is a really exciting and promising piece, because that really shifts the number of students who then register, because they can do that after having done some core math. They might, state by state, they might say students have to take Algebra 2, but anything after that, they can substitute a computer science course for a math course. That does two things, right? It really allows the students more choice or agency in their education, right? And that's a really good thing. It's engaging for them. But two, it provides them an opportunity to get credit for it, so it's another incentive to go out and do that work. All right. And again, just kind of referencing what I said earlier about your great data, right? You have the best graduation rate. So many students so many folks in the state who have at least that high school diploma, leading the nation in that. Again, that's just opportunity when we think about something like making CS count as a core graduation requirement. Students are there, let's give them that opportunity. And just kind of rounding it out with some other ones, having a policy plan set in place is a big piece, right? We know that actually of the 9, this is one of the most effective or impactful when it comes to moving the needle for computer science, is just kind of getting that statewide computer science plan in place. And that's why it's so exciting to see the great work being led by the governor in this space, and the work that I think we can continue to help catalyze in making that happen. Again, requiring all high schools to offer computer science is something that probably comes a little down the road, because it's a little tough to require all schools to offer computer science if they don't actually have the folks on staff to teach the courses. So it's one that we work to, but it's an important one. Okay, and just kind of rounding these out, providing funding is a big piece. Again, this question came up in the back. Hey, doing this training can be expensive. We do have nonprofits like Code.org that are currently doing free computer science professional learning opportunities, but that doesn't mean there still aren't other needs that schools have to put this in place, right? They might have needs around hardware, or they might have continued professional learning needs for their staff. Okay, and then just wrapping this up, having a policy state supervisor is really important. So having someone specific to computer science education and leading that work, not just having this as kind of the 4th or 5th hat that they need to wear on the job, is key. All right, so just kind of in wrapping up for now, we're going to turn to some Q&A. I want to do two things. One is kind of want to give a big shout out to, these are called the Govs for CS. So this is a national effort that really is growing in terms of governors who are standing up and making commitments to say, we're going to get behind computer science in a big way. And that happened here in Montana with Governor Bullock's recent announcement to join that Govs for CS group. So I'd like to close by kind of playing a reel here of some of the recent activity. So I'm going to move to a little video to show work in schools here in Montana, and then we're going to go to some questions.
Superintendent of Public Instruction Elsie Arntzen and Governor Steve Bullock joined middle school students today for an hour of code. Nearly 200 schools across the state participated in the event, which highlights the importance of computer science education. Both Arntzen and Bullock participated in a computer science lesson with the students, where they played an educational game that required Python coding to move the character. Bullock says he was impressed with the students' skills and stated computer science is used in an increasing number of professions.
So it really does afford the opportunity to give students the exposure early on to what they'll need going forward, and then they can build upon that as they go.
Bullock also announced a proposed $250,000 investment into computer science education across the state. That will be included in his office's budget for the next legislative session. The money would go to increasing computer science training opportunities for teachers in Montana.
So what we'll do is we're just going to go to questions here, but what I wanted to say just in closing is, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you. Microsoft's so excited to work with the Chamber, with the state, supporting the governor's work, Superintendent Arnson's work. We really admire the steps that they're taking, and we're hoping that you'll join us as we kind of set out to build a coalition for this work. So and I'm just backing it up here one step, I'm just going to make a little call to action here that you might consider joining a coalition that we're building to advance computer science education in Montana. And so I actually do have a contact here that some colleagues shared with me. So you can contact Chris, or actually if you just want to come up to me afterwards too, my colleague Michael Matt-Miller over here as well. Put your hand up, Michael. So we'll be around, and I think we have about 5 to 10 minutes left for any questions that you might have. Otherwise, we'll wrap.
Any question? Don't be shy. Oh, actually, yes, we have a question over here.
Somebody over there needs to get ready to ask the next one, so you can run back. The question that I have, and it might be really naive, but Megan, when she was talking earlier, she talked about young people having access to phones and technology in the womb, for lack of a better term. So is Microsoft or any other technology company looking at ways, because I listen to my kids talk and they're playing on their phones or their iPad all the time and saying, gosh, I wish I knew it could do this, or I wish it could do that. And are these IT companies developing anything in phones and IT and youth software that inspires going into computer science?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's connecting to those students' interests and what gets them really excited about technology and building on that, right? Kind of meeting them where they are with their interests. So I'm going to reference a couple of things. One is, curriculum, specifically code.org has a course called CS Principles that has app-based work in it. So a lot of students get really excited, for example, about creating their own apps, right? Or they get to design, what's the problem that I really want to work on? And that's where I think it's key, is that we meet the student's interest that's maybe a non-tech interest, like, what is the student really passionate about? And then we say, how does computer science relate to that? So what I really appreciate about a lot of the curriculum that we see now, and this comes back to, I think, a question about, like, how do we give guidance on courses that students take? Code.org has a great set of courses at the high school level, and even foundations being built as early as K through 5, and they do that work of kind of connecting students to technology, whether it be the phones, so they have phone-based pieces where students can build apps, or desktop apps, or any number of interests that students have, and then again connecting it to something outside of tech that student might be passionate about.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Greg. My name's Kate Lufkin with the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce, and we heard this morning again about kind of issues with getting students connected to potential employers and work opportunities while they're still in school. Can you talk at all about any successes or pathways you've had with bringing employers within any of those computer science industries into schools, and an ability to partner students kind of with that private industry while they're still in school?
Yeah, and I think you're referencing kind of the TEALS model, and then there's a question within that TEALS model maybe around, like, as we bring computer science professionals from industry into the classroom, might that lead to other opportunities? And I'd say, yeah, it can on a case by case, right? So while TEALS isn't necessarily, it's not a program designed as a core feature to lead to an internship or mentor opportunity, those kind of things do surface, absolutely, right? You get a CS professional who isn't necessarily interested in leaving their daytime job. They're just really passionate also about connecting with kids and getting them excited about computer science. So that creates opportunities like what you just described, yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi, I have an 11-year-old daughter who went to one of the Girls Who Code in Kalispell and really wanted her to be interested in it, and it didn't really resonate with her. But yet, if one of the influencers that she follows, making slime, teenage fashion, were to somehow incorporate that into whatever they're doing that is cool,
Yeah.
I guarantee her interest would go way up. The previous panel had talked a little bit about influencers and marketing. Is there any work to be done to influence in other avenues outside of, perhaps the schools? She gets what she gets at school, but there are many other influences when they're on their devices.
Yeah, absolutely. Just about any industry you can think of, right, has a story to tell. So you maybe it's fashion or whatever it may be. There's going to be someone in that industry who's excited about computer science and wants to help students make that connection and see that, hey, computer science is also a part of this. Let's connect to that core interest, whatever that spark is that needed to be lit for your daughter. So I'd say there's more work that needs to be done to have those things surface during the curriculum. I think that, again, I'm going to point to code.org as having some great resources out there that show exactly what you're describing, that show kind of like how a person who works in a particular field that one may not necessarily historically associate with computer science really can speak to why that connection and is so important in the work that they lead. But I think also what you're describing it just falls in that demand generation bucket about kind of how do we tell the story broadly for computer science and why it's important. So I think more of those stories we need to surface during Computer Science Education Week. We have a campaign at Microsoft called Make What's Next that's really focused also about this. And that will be launched in March. And we will be really intentionally trying to surface stories like what you just spoke to and helping girls make those connections. And then the final thing I would say about it is, we want to see other like youth-serving organizations take this up, and that's why we're partnering with the likes of FFA, or we also partner with, in the out-of-school environment, the Boys and Girls Club, right? We also partner with 4-H. Those are all partners that we have for the kind of the same reasons that you're sharing, which is, computer science is everywhere, and we need to help students experience it in all these different ways so that they get that spark lit. So thank you.
Is there any other questions? Going once? Dos? Tres? Thank you,
Okay.
Microsoft.
Thank you so much.
Really
Appreciate the time.
informative. We appreciate your time. Thank you.